Welcome back to the Shanti Ma podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review. You can also sign up to become a member on patreon.com/Shanti Ma. With your support, I will update my sound and video quality so that you can have the best experience possible. Let's get into today's show, episode 10. How can the darkest moment of our life also become one of the greatest defining moments of our life? A prison sentence for some could mean the end of life as we know it. Or is it within your power to regain control and become a better version of yourself? Today I sit down with a remarkable man to discuss the spiritual awakening he underwent while serving time in prison and show how a shift in mindset can change everything. From energy and intuition to personal responsibility and self-discipline, we learn that you can transcend difficult times if you really decide to do so. This is somebody who used their rock bottom to be the guiding light to heal, start over, and forever change the trajectory of their life. He's a professional MMA fighter with a first-degree black belt and a 6-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's clearly taken life by the balls, so I think we could all take a page or two from his book. Without further ado, please welcome Joel Blanton. Welcome, Joel.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I've actually been wanting to chat with you for a while, and I had listened to you on Bronson's podcast, and when I was listening to your story, I was thinking, wow, like what a incredible outlook on life, and somebody who has been through like such an intense experience, and to be able to come out the other end of it with like massive insights that, I think a lot of people don't get to that point. And I was like, he sounds like a monk or something. Like he's gone into a cave to meditate for a while.
Felt like I needed to sometimes.
So, for those that are listening, could you tell us like how that all happened? Like, how did you get there, and kind of the background story of what happened?
I guess the very first, very real moment is, when I was sitting in a day room. I had gotten myself into trouble, and I was in prison. I was doing a free writing exercise for a philosophy course. And I stopped, and I just started rubbing my hand, and I started looking around, looking across the day room, and then it was so powerful of an energy shift that it made my body move, my stomach churned, it flip-flopped, and my very first thought was I had to be really messed up to get myself in here with these guys.
Right.
And it was after that, it was everything. As long as nobody grabbed me, I was going home. You could say what you want, and a lot of people said what they wanted, but at that point, it didn't matter anymore. I was going to home, going to get out, and it just several life moments after that, in reading, really, really investing in myself. And it's funny because a lot of people talk about rehabilitation, and that unless the person who is in the program really wants it for themselves, it doesn't matter what they're doing. They can do it for the courts, they can do it for whatever. they can do it for their husband, for their wife, unless they really truly want it for themselves. The change isn't going to happen. Whether it's not going to be genuine anyway.
Right. So can we back up a second here? And if you're comfortable sharing the story of like how you ended up, like, I mean, you can share as much as you want or as little as you want, but how you ended up incarcerated and how that all kind of like the steps before that.
Yeah. Growing up, I wasn't a bad kid, super small town, like 18,000 people.
Where are you from?
So, very small town. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, and we ended up in a small town of Logansport, Indiana.
Okay.
Really small town, north central Indiana. It wasn't until after high school I started, going to the local dance halls and seeing a group of popular people, but I didn't realize, the violence that was going to come with it, because it was very cliquish, so, and I had been around, my uncle was a wrestler and we always boxed, and my uncles were known to box each other in the front yard if there was a disagreement in between them, as brothers would do.
Let's go outside and settle this.
Absolutely. It was over the rail on the front porch and into the front yard. So that's a fact. But, so I was always around it. It was never anything surprising to see somebody in a fist fight. It was the 70s and 80s and you could get away with that. It wasn't a big deal. You could have a neighborhood scrap and you just went your separate ways. It was what it was. And there was no hashtag, parade about it then. And then, it just kind of escalated, worse and worse characters. And, hey, man, you want to, sure, why not? Have a cousin he was a cousin by marriage, who had been a gang member since he was 13 years old. And I went out to Denver, Colorado and lived with him for a while. And it got it got messy for a while. And then I brought all the big city stuff back to a really small town. And when you do that, it catches up with you.
How old were you when you were living with this cousin?
I was 20. Let's see, that was in 90. I came back in 93 from Colorado. So I was 22. I turned 22 that year.
Young man.
Very young, very naive. Thought, when you're that age, you have so much bravado and not enough wisdom to know any better. And I actually was behaving myself on the night that everything happened. I was going to an after party at a bar with a couple of friends and then an acquaintance. The acquaintance apparently was uncomfortable with where we were going through and where we were at, and he had pulled a knife out, and I took it from him.
You weren't sure what he was going to do?
Yeah, because at that point, I figured he was either going to use it on me, or I was going to take advantage, and then I struck first. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure which two of the guys that were supposed to be my friends took his wallet, but a week later I got arrested, and 3 months later, right after my pre-trial, I got arrested for robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. It was a Class A felony, punishable for 20 to 50 years.
Whoa.
Yeah. And they tried to come with, hey, we'll lower it down 10 years. You'll do 5 if you behave. So I said, no, I didn't take his wallet. I didn't rob the guy. The two guys, they were my friends. Both made statements, said I did everything. I beat him up really bad. I took his wallet. They couldn't believe I did that to him. And then police had their open and shut case. Got a 2-year degree while I was there. At first I did it just because I knew I was going to get a time cut for it, because if you complete a program, you get a certain amount of time off your sentence. So I was doing it so I could get out early. But I had a phenomenal, powerful life moment that felt like it still just happened yesterday. And, I'm just been out and home and working, and, I've had my trips and my stumbles, since then. Not going to say I've been perfect since then, but it happens. It's still a daily struggle sometimes. I try to look at my own behavior and realize it was a result of my upbringing and stuff that happened to me as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then just correct that and bring that back around.
Yeah. And, you know, whether it's, you know, somebody ends up in prison or they end up heavily medicated on pharmaceuticals, or a drug problem, or, you know, anything like even depression, and like somebody who ends up like with, you know, suicidal sort of issues and things like that, you know, I feel like most of those things are rooted in the things we learn early on in childhood, you know, and it's sad, because I think that a lot of people who end up in those situations, like, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with mental health. Like, I think that a lot of that is what it is. And then you get labeled too. So that's actually something I was going to ask you. Well, before I get there is, sorry, how old were you and how long did you spend in prison?
I got arrested in October of 1994. So I was turned 23 that year.
Okay.
And I got out in April of 1999. So a total of 4.5 years. Right.
Okay.
And I was 99, turned 28 that summer. I wanted to be out for my birthday, my niece to be born, and for my 10-year high school class reunion. I made all three, so.
Nice. And you said the college program that you were taking, that helped to take time off of your overall. And then obviously you would have had like parole and stuff like that after the fact, or?
Well, what I did when I started my college program is I wrote the judge a letter that sentenced me. This is my classes. This is what I'm doing right now. Send it to him. Midterms, same thing. Here's my midterms grade. Here's my finals grade. Here's my next schedule. And I did that repeatedly throughout. And right after I graduated, it probably was in January, I wrote him right away. And it was actually, I had filed for what's called a sentence modification. They modify your sentence that you got. And of course, I got denied. I hadn't completed any programs or anything. So I get what's called legal mail probably about a month later. And I was shocked because I hadn't filed any paperwork, and I knew I was, close to going home at that point anyway. I had taken a job in the kitchen. I was still lifting weights really heavy, and I took it to one of the guys with what we call a jailhouse lawyer. And there's basically a bookworm who spends a lot of time in a legal library in the prisons. So I took it to him, and he said, "That's good. You have a court date." And I was like, "I didn't file anything." It's like, "I haven't filed anything since the original date." He said, "Then the judge reopened your case." He said, "What's going to happen is you're going to go home." And he just folded it up and he gave it to me. So I don't know about that. So they came the morning of my court date. They came and got me. I had a escort. It was actually a funny thing. I went to high school with the police officer who came with his son. So I was able to have some conversation with somebody familiar on the way back. Ended up having to stay the night in the local county jail, and then they took me up the next day to talk to the judge. There was nobody in the courtroom but me on one end of the table, and then I had some family that had come up to listen. And the judge came out, no robe, just my case file in his hand, and he sat down, he opened it up, took off his glasses, and he started talking. We talked for he just drilled me questions for half hour, 45 minutes. And when I told him that, due to the time cut with the college program, that I didn't know exactly how many days I had left at that point, but my mom did. And she shouted out 29 days. And it was, I was like, well, I have 29 days left. And he shut my case file. He slid it away from me. He said, "I don't even know why we're talking then." I was like, "Great, I'm going back to prison for a month." And he said, "I'm going to put in for an amended sentence for time served and we'll process your paperwork and we'll get you out of here. So not only when you get taken back like that to the court, and you get released, the most you'll get is, house arrest or probation. The state doesn't have anything to do with it anymore because the facility didn't release you. So he put in and he completely cut me out clean. He gave me time served, no probation, nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I kind of started crying. It gets me worked up when I still to this day, when I think about it, and it's been over 20 years ago. And, I walked out. I told my family that I asked them to just go home. I would like to walk because it was late April. It was beautiful out, and I walked out the county doors. And man, everything was so fast because I hadn't been in any cars in a long time, everything was just so fast. And some of the town had changed a little bit, so I was getting like shock value right out of the gate coming out of the courthouse. So it was really nice. And I sat down on my grandparents' front steps, and my very first thought was, I need to get a job. And I've kind of been working ever since, and working on myself, just trying to, got into, the pro wrestling and then jiu-jitsu or MMA and then jiu-jitsu. So I'm still training that.
So, when you were in and you're taking the college program, what courses were you taking? Just out of curiosity.
Man, I had a political science class that I absolutely loved. That really stands out because that guy was brilliant. He had a PhD in statistics and something else. Guy had 2 PhD. It was unbelievably smart. Philosophy, sociology. Had 1 math class, I believe. Man, I don't know. I have to go back through everything. I was, 20 years ago. I have an associate's degree in general studies in the arts and sciences. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you said political science. I've noticed you've been liking some of my posts on Facebook.
Yes.
Yes. Which due to censorship, we're not allowed to talk about.
Oh man.
Wild times we're living in.
It's insane right now.
Yeah, I know. I've had to be really careful about what I say because you can't really say much right now because no one wants to have a conversation. It's like people are doing witch burnings all over again, except it's assassinating people online. Yeah.
Yeah. Character assassination.
Oh yeah. Grab your pitchfork. We're all jumping on the bandwagon.
Yes, absolutely.
Gonna spit roast you.
Yeah. I can remember a really good friend of mine who lives in Indianapolis had a conversation about this. He said, I like the similarities. That's what I like to talk about. And I was like, that's not what I like to talk about. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, the similarities that we all have with each other is the easy part. I want to know what makes us different so we can learn about it. That's how we really engage in each other as a human being and really learn about each other as human beings is what makes you different from me and your experiences, and that is, there's billions of different experiences. So it just makes for an amazing thing, but nobody really wants to talk about that.
I know. Well, I've been having independent conversations with different friends because I find differences fascinating. I have friends from all over the world. I've traveled all over the world, and I've talked to, quite a few different people from different cultures and races. And, we're all kind of just right now, other than with the people you're close with, you can't really have conversations because, and I'm just going to say this, I'm sorry, but there's a huge political movement happening right now.
Yeah.
There are so many things. If you start looking at what's going on, there's a political agenda happening. And so on the surface, we see what people are fighting for, which is completely fair and reasonable.
Absolutely.
But underneath that, and we do need change massively. And I also accept the fact that there's other people out there who don't view things the way that I do. And there are still some people who are incredibly racist and need to have a hard slap in the face. But underneath all of this, if you start doing some reading and research, there's a massive, massive, massive movement happening here. And it's not so simple. There's so many things going on. And
it's like a rotten onion. It just keeps peeling back the ugly layer after ugly layer after ugly layer to the heart of it. And it's just... Yeah,
it's dark. There's some stuff going on underneath.
It's very dark.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting too because once you start kind of looking into it and you start examining, the different things that conveniently are happening under the radar at the same time as this massive political movement, you're like, okay, coincidence is mathematically impossible when there's so many of them.
Yeah. Like, especially with that is, like I talk about it on occasion, but day to day, to me, to truly make a difference is I go out and I approach the day. Like, for example, I'm having an issue with a guy at work. It's his mannerisms and the way he comes off to me. Mm-hmm. But I still go in every morning and I say morning, and I approach the day as a brand new day. Mm-hmm. But I have cut off all his guff and has drawn a line in the sand mm-hmm. with it, and I don't view it as anything that I have done. Mm-hmm. And I go and try to be the best person that I can be, even in that unideal situation, because I have to work underneath him. So, and just go out every day and, be cordial. Say, hey, how you doing? And just honestly, I was a bit taken aback when I first came down here to Tennessee. People would wave at me from across the street, and I'm wondering why they're waving at me from across the street. Mm-hmm. But Southern hospitality is a very real thing. And I've learned to embrace that a little bit more. I think it's helped me become a little bit better person as well. And I try to, it doesn't always happen, but I'll try to always embrace that and do that from day to day.
Mm. Yeah, that's the thing that, people need to start with every single day, and everybody you meet, that's where you can make changes by being kind and respectful to everybody. And I actually just did I wrote and recorded a speech called "The Pen is Mightier Than the Sword," and I posted it to my podcast platform. It's not really a podcast, but I was like, I have something to say, and I put it out there. And it's true, like being kind, it's not hard. But I think people get so busy and so preoccupied in like stress and like their phones, or like even just where you live, and you kind of forget to be courteous and respectful of the people around you. And I mean, around here, it's just, I don't know if it's a West Coast thing or something, but people can kind of treat each other like they're not there. They don't exist. Like, you get into your elevator and no one's even saying hi. You just both pretend the other one doesn't exist until you're off the elevator. Like, it's weird. It's super weird. So how long have you been in Tennessee now?
I went back to Indiana for about a year, but I've been down here since the end of 2015.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
I love it here.
Yeah. How's the weather today? We have had the craziest June. It's just all rain.
86, 87 degrees with humidity that feels like a weighted vest.
Wait, okay, let me see, because we have different temperature. 86 degrees Fahrenheit to Celsius is 30. Oh yeah, that's nice weather, but humidity makes it like you're constantly sticky.
Yeah, it was funny when I went back to Indiana. They're like, oh, last summer they're like, oh, it's hot, and I'm like, this is great right now. You don't even know. You don't know. So, and I makes me have that much more respect for people south of me who, And because I know the more south you go, the closer to the water, the more humid it gets. So,
and more bugs.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, lots of bugs can thrive in that environment. So, I guess after you left the system, did you experience a lot of discrimination from people? Because I don't know how often you'd have to disclose that. I'm sure to employers and things like that, you have to disclose that, or?
The very first job I went to, they asked why I hadn't worked in so long, and I told him. I was just very blunt about it, and he's like, man, I just don't know. I'm like, look, man, I really need a job. I will be here. I will be here every night. I just need a job. I need something. And the guy hired me. You know what? It was $8.25 an hour for some hard labor. But I was grateful for it, and it got me started. And I always think back to when I worked in the lumber yard.
So, aside from having to disclose that to an employer, like, did you experience any shaming or discrimination from people in your community or your family or anything like that?
It used to kind of hang over my head, like people viewed me like that. And then the longer I've been out, I realized that it really wasn't the case. I believe a lot of people have seen the transformation, especially when getting active in the mixed martial arts community. Because that's one thing that a quality school won't tolerate. You can't be that kind of person and be around that. They're just not going to do that. They'll put you out the door. So you have to maintain some character to be in that. And I think people really seen the change in just having conversations with people and going out and enjoying life instead of, trying to force some things that just aren't for you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. But other than that, not really. Actually, I think at one time it got me out of a ticket because the cop couldn't see my paper plate in my car because the windows were too dark, and he pulled me over. And he seen me. I gave him my driver's license. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Blanton." He gave me my license back, and he let me go. And I was like, it was so strange. He just walked back to his car and drove off. I was like, that was amazing. So, but other than that, no, not really. I mean, I guess if there's anything negative, it had to be blatantly obvious. But I didn't even notice really a lot of it.
Right.
A lot of people are fascinated and sometimes want to talk about it and ask questions because they hear stories and they see movies, and movies are so glamorized about the prison systems, and there's some horrible things that go on some facilities, but I didn't see a whole lot of the extreme what can happen. I've seen guys get in fights, I've seen guys get jumped, stuff like that. But other than that, it wasn't, I stayed to myself, paid my debts, minded my business, and did my schoolwork, lifted weights.
Right. And when you were in there, did you experience any kind of I imagine that there'd be a certain amount of depression that would come along with it. I don't know. I mean, I think that if it was me, I would absolutely be. So I'm just curious if that was your experience at all.
Yeah, I can. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I can remember because I tried to never walk with my head down. I always want to have that because it helps me with my energy to walk with my head up. I remember I was going down to walk and I had my head down, and I remember someone yelling at me, "Hey man, chin up!" And it still echoes in my head today. So I always try to still carry it like that. And it just helps keep my energy at a higher level, at a better place.
Yeah, true. Because body language does say a lot. And it's interesting that you say about the chin up because last year I had done a sweat lodge ceremony and I came out and I was feeling like really warm and kind of woozy and stuff. And I was walking along this like little path and because it's kind of like in the forest. I mean, it's kind of sad because now the First Nations, at least in Capilano, instead of having their ceremonies where they probably would have traditionally, they have to kind of hide them. And it's like along the train tracks and stuff. And but anyways, there's a little bit of forest area there. And I was walking down this like little path, and a guy walked past me, and he says, "Chin up. You should always walk with your head high." And I was just like, and it's funny because I've thought about it a lot since. Where I was like, "What did he mean by that? Like, is that like a cultural thing? Is it an energy thing?" But it also struck me, and every once in a while when I'm walking, because I've always liked to like look at the ground and bugs and rocks and things like that, or watching my step. But that stood out to me. But then I was like, okay, but if I don't watch my feet, what if I trip or something?
Yeah, definitely.
I guess head up if it's even ground. The exception can be if it's uneven ground.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely want to watch where you're stepping when you're out hiking. So
definitely. So did you end up having any friends or anything like that in there when you said you kind of kept to yourself, but is there anybody you kind of bonded with?
Actually, a guy that I had ran around with in Logan Sport had ended up being there with me. It was a pretty low point. Charles was a good person. He just got himself into trouble. Like I did, and we actually were in the same dorm together. It was great to see him again. We went out and had drinks on my 21st birthday together, and then now now we're in prison together. But he had found out later he had a history of seizures, but he died on the basketball court in there. I came down. There's a stage set up next to the basketball court where all the weights were. And I remember we walked down together, and I went up, and he went to play basketball, and I went up to lift weights, and I come down, and somebody was laying on the floor, and I was like, man, that's my guy. And I almost got in trouble that night because they were trying to clear everybody out of the gym so that the ambulance people could come in and get him, and they said he died on the way. But I always knew better because that's just liability. But he was not alive lying there. And I always remember the guy. That was hard. I had a couple people that came through that were from the same town, but I probably the last bunkie I had. Mike. Mike was 6 foot tall, and he weighed 330 pounds. He's one of the just broadest, front to back, thickest guys I've ever seen in my life. He's immensely powerful for living off of state food. But we bonded through lifting weights, and it was a good time. He was a good bunkie to have, man. We shared a lot of camaraderie. We sat outside of the cell in a day room and talked.
Doesn't hurt to have somebody that big also to walk around with.
No. I mean, I was. It's really funny because we, especially with everything going on right now, in there it's multiplied. The race issue, there's not a lot of commingling, but I was the only guy. I was the only Caucasian in my weightlifting crew. Mike was kind of my pass, but I was strong. I had good work ethic, and nobody argued with it. We had a great program going on, and we went in and we killed it. And ultimately, just being a solid person and having character rises above all, even in a situation like that, I think ultimately carries, and I still think about that quite a bit because it carries a lot of weight with me. And, but I hope, Charles is gone, but I hope Mike is doing well. We were pretty tight. He was my last, when they came and got me for court, we were roomies. So,
right. And sorry, the first guy, Charles, he died on the basketball court, but
yeah,
how did he die? Oh, a heart attack.
They said it was a heart attack. Yeah.
But you don't believe it?
I don't know. Maybe a heart attack, because I knew he had some small health issues, but I don't think it was that large.
Right.
And then come to find out, his brother was there too, and I never even knew it. So ended up meeting his brother after the fact. Mm-hmm. So, and then was passing acquaintance with his brother up until the time I left.
And so this is also something that I feel like you were saying about sort of the glamorization that you see a lot in Hollywood and film and stuff like that. But is there a certain amount of politics that you have to be mindful of when you're in there?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm curious about that, because I feel like other than like what I've seen obviously on TV or whatever, that there's a certain amount of needing to be tactful and smart about how you interact with everybody, because you just don't want to get on anyone's bad side. And you also, this is where it seems tricky. If you get too chummy with one side, automatically you might be associated with being
guilt by association.
Wrong. Yeah. How did you navigate that kind of stuff? What did it look like? I'm curious.
You pay your debts.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Some guys will have, say they've been there for a little while. They have extra commissary. They have loads of commissary, and it'll be what they call a store. So if I want something from him that I don't have, I go down to the store. Say I want to binge on some sugar, and I go down and I get like a box of like Hostess cakes. We called them Zoom Zooms and Wham Whams, and they came. they were like the peanut butter crisps or the zebra cakes or whatever. If you wanted a box, I just want one box. Okay, come commissary day, when you order, I want 2 back. So I get one now, but I have to give him 2 back because he fronted them to me. Or if I get 2, I'll give him 3 back.
Right.
It's a very, very real barter and trade system as far as that's concerned.
Right.
And if you have a debt, pay it. That keeps you out of, a lot of guys gamble with, they'll play poker and they'll keep a tab, come commissary day, pay your debt. If you see something, don't say anything.
Right.
See a lot of fights in the dorm. Nobody says, no, don't say a word. It's none of their business, and a little bit more politics. It depends on who holds sway in the immediate living unit at the time, because there's always a subtle power shift or power struggle going on. It's a lot of times it's very quiet. One person moving into the immediate living area can change the whole complex of the living quarters situation. I knew a guy that he was an older Puerto Rican gentleman. He was a dope guy, and he didn't want to sell to somebody because the guy still owed him money.
I was going to say, dope isn't cool, or dope isn't dope?
No, dope isn't dope.
Okay.
He got hit in the head with a padlock. Got a big gash on the side of his head. But his paid strongman took care of the problem. And that was one of the things that happened in the dorm, that nobody said anything. They knew something happened because we all got put on lockdown.
Yeah.
After everything was over, they just laid him in his bed. Everybody was quiet. They knew something was happened, but they didn't know what had happened. Right. They just thought the guy was asleep because he was laying face down in his bed. But nobody said anything. And they even investigated it for a little while. Nobody ever found out anything, because it was just, that's one of the unwritten rules. You just don't talk.
Yeah, I imagine that snitching in jail would be unfavorable.
More bad things can happen. Bad things can happen. So yeah, it's just I concentrated on my school. During the summer break, I would take a job in the kitchen. I had friends in the back. I got a really good job in the kitchen. You could barter and trade when you worked in the back.
What kind of food?
If you worked in the back, whatever came into the facility, you had access to. If you worked on the front line, like serving, you had that. You could eat as much as you wanted, but you could only eat that unless someone snuck something to you. But if you got in the back, like in the bakery or in the meat room or the special diet needs room, if you worked on the grill, I worked in the stock room and I worked in the bakery. But I had a friend who worked on the grill, so when I showed up, he went in at 6:00 to start work, and I showed up just after 8:00. He would have eggs ready for me, and then I would let him know what came in, and I would just get it over to him.
Nice.
It was barter and trade. I had fresh eggs in the morning, and you follow through. If someone took care of you, you take care of them back that way. You
scratching each other's backs.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very real barter and trade. It's special stuff comes in. The stockroom was great because we handled everything that came into the kitchen that came into the facility. So we had access to everything. So we were we held the golden key. It was nice.
So, I guess you had said recently, well, you didn't say it recently. I heard it recently because I went and I watched the video that you had released, and you were saying something about the system is designed to keep you there. And that I found very interesting. And I wanted to ask you about that. What did you mean by that?
You get released by the state out of the facility, you have parole. And I remember when I got out, the return rate was 85%.
Whoa!
It's staggering, isn't it? 85% of the people who get released go back.
Why?
Sometimes it's easier for them to be on the inside. One of the guys that a couple of the semesters, they tried to put most of us college students together. It was great for study time, but I remember this young guy that slept next to me. He probably had it better on the inside than he did on the outside, because I remember seeing him using deodorant for soap, or soap for deodorant. He just didn't have any money. He was he didn't have any support on the outside. Here we would get randomly locked down. Someone tried to climb the fence right in between the main gate. The guard towers are 25 feet apart, two of them, giant, and he decided to try to climb the fence in between them.
Brave.
So that's immediately attempted escape, goes to segregation. Your time gets extended. And
segregation, is that considered like isolation?
Yeah. Okay. Single man cells.
Yeah.
And you get put on watch. You get maybe so much segregation time, and then it goes into they have what's called time classes. If you're in time class 1, you get 2 days credit for every 1 day served. Time class 2 was 3 days credit for every 2 days served, and then time class 3 is day for day. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in time class 3, you have been messing up.
Right.
So, and then they took some, and then they'll also take some of the accumulated good time that you've earned.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew a guy that was doing his full 12-year sentence. He was just wild. So
Didn't behave.
no, he did not behave at all.
What's the most entertaining thing that you ever saw when you were in there? I'm sure there was probably a few. I can see your brain working right now. You're like, which one?
There's some things that the guy was just talking about. His nickname was Boo. I can think of some things that he said as very inappropriate. So I'm trying to go by him. I don't know. You know, you have a lot of random funny stuff. Probably me. Because I earned me a nickname by a few of the guys. Somebody had gotten in a habanero pepper and asked me if I wanted it. I was like, yeah, I'll put some in my soup. So it was dry, and I crushed up a little bit of it, put it in my soup, and can't believe I'm telling this story. I'm walking through the latrine to head to the day room so I can get some hot water for my ramen noodle soup. And I thought, hey, I need to go to the restroom. I didn't wash my hands. It was one of the most unpleasant, probably 15, 20 minutes of my entire life. It was absolutely horrible. From that day forward, about 5 to 10 people called me Jalapeno Pepper Joe. So, you know, as far as funny, it was probably it was definitely me, my own fault with that. Yeah, but I've seen, you know, there's not a lot of, you try to maintain some sense of positive outlook while you're there, because you don't want to, because once you start to spiral with it, it can get really, really ugly in a very real depressive way if you let it catch you. So I think a lot of the guys, a lot of the humor in like the small banter is like a, how could I say, like a cosmetic humor. You know, they're just painting, you know, in a way that, you know, you would make a joke about something that's hurtful. It's cosmetic to cover up the pain. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think they try to gloss it over. That way they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Oh, because you would need some kind of like ways to cope while you're in there. And when you don't have a lot of the self-soothing amenities like you do if you're at home and you're, you know, like you can go and have a bath, or you can go for a run, or those kinds of things. Like I imagine that would have been a bit of a mental hurdle.
Yeah. And that's, especially now coming home, I have to have my own quiet time. I have to have my own space time. That way I can decompress, because it's constant and there is always something. And from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, it's always on. So I have to, that's one of the reasons I enjoy hiking so much. I mean, I've always been able to commune with nature, and I loved being out in the woods as a kid. It's one of my favorite memories in childhood, is being out in the woods, running with my friends. Now I have a different outlook I have such great respect for the outdoors and the woods and everything. And that is my very true therapy. When I can't get my therapy from jiu-jitsu or from getting a great workout, I know I need to go hiking. I love it anyways, but I know when I need to go, and and it really decompresses me. Steph, my fiance, will go with me now. She knows how much it means to me out in the woods. We don't talk a lot while we're out in the woods, but it's a very shared experience when we go out. She gets, we've talked a lot about it and how I feel about it, and with the energy that I get from the uplifting energy and the cleansing that it gives me from going out in nature. And she respects it, and she's actually kind of grown accustomed to going out with me with that and doing that and helping me with that.
Yeah, you were saying about like when you had first come out and like the stimulation of things moving so fast. And, it's interesting because you don't realize how fast the world is moving and how we are constantly, our senses are being bombarded like massively. And I noticed that actually when I had come out of my yoga course, and we were 20 of us in this little village in a place in northern India. And we were on a property where it was just the 20 of us. And I spent a lot of time, like I realized how much I needed those moments of solitude as well. So I'd go out to the back roof and have my lunch alone or my breakfast. And sometimes I would socialize with different people. I mean, I loved everybody there, but I would spend a lot of time alone. And then on the weekends, we would take the bus to this little town called McLeod-Ganj, where it's funny because it's still it's like the home of the Dalai Lama. Like it's still very Buddhist and lots of monks. But just from leaving and spending so much time in such a slow paced, calm kind of environment to all of a sudden, noise and vehicles and lots of people. And it was overwhelming, and energetically I felt drained, like just couldn't wait to get back to my little village. And and so
absolutely.
Yeah, so you definitely need to have those moments where you just tune all of that out, and nature is a great way to do that. And actually, I recently had to last night, with all of the negativity that's on social media right now, I was like, I'm deleting these apps. Like, I need to delete them for a week. I need to spend some more time in nature and, cleanse my consciousness.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I meditate before I go in, before work in the morning. I'll let the universe guide me, whether it's an algorithm on my phone or not, because I know at that hour it knows what I'm listening to, so it'll pop something up, and usually I'll listen to what's suggested first. There's been a couple that I've been searching out, and I'll do some conscious breathing, so do some belly breathing, and really try to get my my source vibration, my personal vibrations, just get it up and get a good. It's a very real body buzz for me. It's one of the most amazing things I've been able to do for myself. Is finding my own personal vibration, my own energy source, and to be able to consciously bring it and raise it up, and to be able to do that in every morning and go in and walk in to work with a fresh body buzz is great. It's been one of the most helpful things, and I've been doing that for a little while now.
So, that was actually something I thought of when you were saying about this moment that you had in the day room where you had felt this actual shift or push of energy. And you said it was like a full body overall, like to me, it kind of sounded like a spiritual awakening of some kind. And even as you talk about your story in there, you seem to have a pragmatic approach to the whole thing. But also it sounds to me like it almost was the fork in the road that led you to this trajectory that you're obviously on now. And so I guess that's what I'm curious about is, did you find that became almost like a spiritual experience or awakening, whatever you want to call it? I hate those buzzwords, but do you know what I mean? Was that what it was for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I talk about energy. I'll say I love to talk about energy. I was watching this video. They said that we're made up of about 73 trillion cells. If you think about it, think of like a lake or a pond, and it's very still, no waves. And you take a rock and throw it way out, and it plops in the middle, bloop, and it ripples across. That's just one. Now amplify that by 73 trillion. Now to me, that's very powerful. And how you change your thinking pattern will change your frequency and how that vibration happens. Because you have everything spinning inside the cell, the electrons, and how I believe your thoughts can help control that. And when you have a very powerful, very real moment, you feel it. You can feel it shift through your body, because it's just like that wave. As if remember, we're made up of probably close to 70% of water. So if that can happen in a pond out in the middle of in a very isolated area, why can't I do that with my body in the same manner? Mm-hmm. And I bet that's been something that, especially the last couple of years, that I've really been working on. A book that I read called Frequency: The Power of Personal Vibration. I forget the author, but it was a very powerful book. It was great. It had a little lull in the middle for me, but it talked about your own personal vibration, and then your vibration as a couple, and how you can reciprocate it and raise your vibrational frequency with each other in a couple. And it's been great for my relationship with Stephanie. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but
I do it all the time. You're on point. I'm enjoying. I'm engaged in what you're saying.
I think about it a lot, because I want to be able to feel that all the time. I talked to somebody not too long ago. They asked me how it felt, and I was like, the afterglow. They were like, yeah, and I was like, that's what it feels like when you get that. When you find that your own personal vibration, your source vibration, that's what it feels like. It feels like you have an afterglow all the time, and it's an amazing thing to have, because if you think about it, that's one of the most powerful energies that we have is that kind of energy between a man and a woman. The people who don't understand or follow energy or study energy still feel it, even though they're uneducated about it. They still feel it, because it's that powerful. And when you can harness that consciously, just grab a book, look it up on YouTube. You'll start going down the rabbit hole, and that's what I did. And I've been digging through the rabbit hole ever since. And hopefully it doesn't stop, because I'm completely enjoying the process. It changed my look on why people do things. It's not good and evil. It's a low energy decision. It's a low energy behavior. A
lot of which is learned behavior.
Yeah, it's learned. Yeah, it's a coping mechanism. It's a defensive mechanism, which I had. Which led me to abandon so many things in my life. It was a low energy decisions. And man, when I that was another breakthrough that I had when I realized that was what had happened to me when I was younger. And man, I had another boost of energy. Man, I felt so much better. It was cleansing. I cried so much. Me and Steph were out on the porch here at where we're living now, and man, it just came out, and talked to her about it, and just it spilled out. It just wouldn't stop. I couldn't stop talking. Couldn't stop crying. And afterwards, man, I felt even better as a human being. And those are the moments that I live for, that help me be better.
Yeah. I think that, and I I talk about this a lot, is personal responsibility and humility. And, it's never, I think that there's this sort of version of spirituality that people are kind of promoting right now where, it's all about feeling good and, warm, fuzzy feelings and stuff. But the thing is that for us to get to that place, I feel like we have to get familiar with the patterns and places in ourselves that are destructive. Like, I'm sorry,
Yes,
but
yes,
it's a lifelong process. It's, not a, I figured out how, this, how to meditation. And it's like, if I had to explain how many times I have gone on this roller coaster ride of like having a practice and feeling so dedicated and, feeling so good and so strong in it. And then all of a sudden I'm back to this other, and I think it's these peaks and valleys that we kind of go through on this sort of spiritual journey because, all of a sudden injury, illness, death, loss, like all of these human emotions that are brought about by the, experience we have here can all of a sudden come out, and it's like a kick in the face. And you're like, okay, now I have to figure out how to navigate this. And so to come back to kind of what I was saying about the spiritual practice, it's, personal responsibility and looking at yourself and seeing the self-sabotage, the patterns and the things that you're doing that are kind of ugly or just kind of shitty. And then being like, okay, this is not nice to recognize, but this is what happens when I, I'm overwhelmed. I become a control freak or whatever it may be. And it's impossible for people to want to be around me. And so you have to look at those parts of yourself too. So it kind of sounds like, you've used, and I relate to it because of some of my own life in my own way, is you have used the different struggles that have happened in your life to be like, I have the choice. And it starts with looking at myself and understanding how I got here, understanding where I want to go, and looking at the stuff that's kind of unsavory that, most people avoid looking at. But like,
yeah, that's the big thing. There's whether I personally truly believe that everybody has stuff about them that they don't want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you choose to consciously address it in this world, or like in my discussion with Bronson with the psychedelics, mm-hmm. It's so hard with them because once you ingest them, you don't have a choice at that. You can't back out.
That's the point where I start to panic and go, "Oh my God, should I throw up?" Wait,
it's if I throw up, I'm in for the ride now. Buckle up.
By the way, once you take them, you can't throw up. It doesn't work, and it actually makes your panic attack so much worse. Trust me.
So I think that's one thing, because it absolutely forces you to look and see the demons. That's one of the things I always saw. I was so ugly faces in the tree. If I was in the woods, it was in the trees and the leaves, the way the leaves formed in the trees. If I looked away from the leaves, it was in the bark and the flowers, and the way the dirt was sitting. There was always ghouls and goblins and demons, and I believe those were a lot of reflection of a lot of the ghouls and demons and goblins that I had in myself. And whether I put them there later on as a teen and as a younger adult, or if that was something that happened to me and somebody else put those there as a result of trauma, ultimately you I believe you should address them, and because it doesn't do anything but help, but it's one of the hardest things in the world is to address them and really give the ugly about it, because you can't know the sunshine without understanding the rain and the thunder of it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's in some ways I think that if we were taught that more growing up, that we need to have these other experiences and how to handle those experiences too. Like, if we don't have the good or the bad, or, there's no contrast, everything's just kind of this neutral, like we would have nothing to compare it to. But I think the thing is that if we can get good at realizing when things are kind of ugly or uncomfortable, that it will pass. And when something is good, we should also appreciate it because it will also pass. And such as the cycles of life.
Yeah. It's a roller coaster.
So which psychedelics, if you don't mind me asking, because I've done a few here and there, and I don't often, because I think I have control problems. I get which maybe I should, but I'll get paranoid and get very like, oh my God, I'm not safe. And I know that is something that I would have to, face in myself. But I also think that there has to be a certain point of which you're ready. And this is one thing people are like, oh, let's do psychedelics and, heal. It's like, no, you got to be ready, because the stuff that's going to come up is what you need to see and could make you shit your pants.
Definitely. And sometimes when you think you're ready, you're not ready.
And you can't all of a sudden, once it's on.
For a longer, deeper look, definitely the psilocybin, the mushrooms. Mm-hmm. It lasts longer. It's a little bit more introspective. You have so much time to think over the course of the journey. For overall intensity and absolutely scare the hell out of you, DMT. I've never broke through. I did not clear my intentions one day, and I didn't, say my piece, set my intentions, and just charge right into it. And by the time I went in my head, I was like, oh shit. The best way I could describe it is, I was going through a wormhole. The only thing I can remember is red, white, and black colors alternately. I can't even remember any shapes or patterns. It was just it was so fast. It was indescribably scary. That was the one moment I thought I had completely done it. I was like, I died. I was like, I finally did it. This is it. And what solidified that for me was my name, Joe Blanton, and then my legacy ricocheted back and forth. It was like Joe Blanton, my legacy, Joe Blanton, my legacy, Joe Blanton, my legacy. And it was echoed back and forth. And it was like a constant inhale, just, and when I finally came through, I screamed from my buddy. He'd come up there and he's like, are you all right? And I'm like, I don't know. Cause I was just so glad to be back here. Because I thought it was done. That was it. And I was up on top of a storage shed to be closer to, the source, whatever. And
wait, so you were on the top of a roof?
I was on top of a storage shed. Yes.
Son,
about
don't try this at home, kids.
About 9 or 10 feet up in the air. But I laid down on it, and it was in the summertime, and the warmth from the sun was on the wood. And I laid down and I put my face on it. I rubbed it because I was so glad to be here. And then gathered myself together and I climbed down and I pulled out my knife and I started, because I carry a pocket knife, and I started digging at the earth until I got some good dirt, and I grabbed 2 handfuls of dirt and I rubbed it on my face and rubbed it on my hair, and I smelled it and I was like, this is amazing. And he was like, are you okay? And I'm like, I have to go home.
You're like, I might not look okay, but I feel good.
I was like, yeah, no kidding. I was like, I have to go home. But I needed, the reason why I wanted to go home is because I was so absolutely grateful to be here and be still alive. And everything was so much sharper visually. I will say it changes the way you see things. You know, we all look at things the same way, but it changes the way you see things. And I could not wait to come home and look at my girlfriend's face with brand new eyes, with a brand new vision. I was so much more grateful to be able to see her again and be able to look at her in a different light and a different sight. It was very profound. And then, you know, we'd started having issues again, and mostly that was my fault. I'll take up for that. And went back to Indiana for a while, and I learned so much more about me. Hit a depressive state for a little while. That was probably definitely one of the ugliest times, and probably one of the scariest times looking back in my life. Outside of prison, I'd have probably been better off being in jail for 3 months than go through with that again.
Yeah.
There's only.
Sorry, you would have rather have been in prison for 3 months than go through the emotional turmoil of this time you're talking about.
Yeah. It was I hit like I said, it comes in cycles. I was really good there for a while, and then a really big I'm not quite sure what the trigger was. It just all of a sudden was this overwhelming sadness, of where I was in my life, and I didn't know why it was so heavy, but I cried so much. I would show up at at my coach's gym, and I was supposed to be helping out, and I would show up and I had have tears in my eyes. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I can't quit crying." And I was like, "I'll take it." He's like, "You have an intro?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." I was like, "I'll take a shower if I can get it under control, then I'll take care of it." And then I'm climbing out of the shower, because they have a shower at the facility, and climbing out, and I'm still crying, and I'm like, "Man, I have to go. I'm sorry." And I would just go home, and I would shut myself in my room and sit and cry and cry and cry. And I did this. This happened for months. And then only some, I don't even know. Yeah, I think I talked about this with Bronson. I was taking a shower, and, the thing about that was, it was scary because there's only so many times you can think about offing yourself, and so many different ways you can plan it before you ultimately do it. Mm-hmm. And that was where I was at with it. I have a very, very close friend of mine. I call him brother. He was resigned to the fact, he told me later on that he was resigned to the fact that he would ultimately get a phone call that they found my body. And like I said, go back to fast forward. I was in a shower, and I felt like I was going to get sick. I don't know if I could call it a dry heave, but I felt like I completely ejected a very bad energy out of me. It's one of the most bizarre, spiritual, energetic experiences I've ever had in my life.
Was this with psychedelics?
No, I was completely sober.
Oh.
Completely sober. And I probably heaved 3, 4 times. And every time I did, there was a bright flash of white light, and I felt a little bit better each time. But it was very material. That like something was leaving me. And after that, I didn't cry for about another week. And then maybe it was, 2 weeks, and then maybe the next day, and then it would be 3 weeks. And then I was slowly getting better. Steph and I had started talking again, but I still was a little down. And then it was funny you said earlier, self-sabotage was the quote that you used. I read a book called Stop Doing That Shit. And one of the things is it talks about is very real self-sabotage. And it did all this, I was thinking about this whole experience that I had been through, being depressed, and reading through this book of self-sabotage, and then put a couple more things together, and then it clicked, and I flinched because we were laying in her hammock together, and I flinched, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I have to write." She goes, "Okay." And I was like, "I have to write right now." I got up, and it hit me what had been wrong with me, part of what was wrong with me, my whole life, of what had been wrong with me earlier in the summer, is that, it was the abandonment issue that I had faced, and that I actually wasn't aware of, that had finally materialized in a very ugly way. Because I'm always tinkering with my brain. I want to read something, and then it leads me to one little key into another room with 20 doors, so you pick another door, and then it leads you into a dorm with, another room with 40 doors. So I got up and I jotted down about 4 or 5 pages real quick, and realized that, me being abandoned, I felt like I was abandoned as a child. And I went over, I talked about this with Bronson, you probably remember. I went over and talked to my dad, and I wanted to live with my dad, and he had told me no.
How old were you?
I was in middle school.
Yeah, that stuff fucks you up.
Yeah, man.
Parents, they don't mean to, but it does.
And and he, and I talked about my father with this, and he was, my dad's really different. He ate copious amounts of acid when he was younger, and he's had a double stroke. So, have you ever seen the movie with Russell Crowe, A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
That's my dad. He is brilliant, a philosophy major and a political science major in college, a double major.
Cool.
He's super smart, but he is completely on his own scale. So he doesn't remember this. And he had a very genuine reaction when I talked to him about it. And it wasn't, I didn't do it. I didn't go to him and talk to him about it to make him feel bad or anything like that. I did it to let him know that it was okay. That I forgave him, that I forgive him for it. And it was just something that happened at the time, and I had to let it go for me. And ever since that discussion, it's been, I've been on a big uphill roller coaster, for the most part. So,
yeah, it's interesting because those moments, I always think of this saying, we're all the villain or the bad guy in somebody else's story. And we have no idea. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we don't. And sometimes these sort of old wounds will just fly under the radar for years. And then other ones you're consciously aware of, and you can be full of, shame, anger, whatever, all of these different things. And you kind of hold on to it. And sometimes it is like you need to vocalize, and it's not because you want to make this other person feel bad, but it's for you. You don't want to hold on to it anymore. So you need to put a voice to it, because if you don't, it's like energy. I've had people on my podcast before where I've talked about energy, And if you hold something in, it goes somewhere in your body. And whether it manifests as like, you know, a mental illness or it manifests as like a physical illness, that stuff stays in there. You have to find a way to let it out. So,
yes, it does. Yes, it does. You know, it's funny you say that because I completely believe that. Yeah, you know, you have to get it out, or else it stays in there, and then it manifests. And it comes up. It multiplies.
Yeah. Well, you were saying about the dry heaving and feeling like this energetic release happening. And in 2013, I did ayahuasca. I went to Ecuador and I did ayahuasca with a shaman down there. It was me and my ex-partner at the time. And that was such a wild experience because like literally we're like wandering around town, like asking for this shaman, and no one speaks English. And we finally found some Irish girl who spoke Spanish and also English. We end up finding this shaman. They pick us up. 3 hours, we drive into the jungle. We cross this little river by this wooden boat, and then we're in, you know, the jungle. And I was just like, it was just crazy. But without getting into like the entire experience, which I can definitely tell you about another time, there was a moment on my first night where there's a certain amount of purging you do, and like physical purging and like vomiting and shitting your ass off and all that kind of stuff. But then I was past the point of purging physical fluids, and I was just dry heaving, but I was seeing like energy coming out, like, and it was like I was remembering conflicts, arguments, things that I had, like, you know, conflicts with like, you know, people in the past. But as I was dry heaving, it was all coming out, like the memory and the energy at the same time, and it coming out of me. And that kind of always stuck with me because, you know, and since then, having conversations with different people who believe that energy gets stuck in the body and you suppress it and you hold it in, that it has to come out somehow. And I found that experience was pretty significant because it made me think, okay, like these are memories that I haven't thought of in years. They're not even things I dwell on. And this whole time they've been locked away inside this, you know, physical body. Like, you know, and then I had one more experience. I've had a few. I had another one. There was a guy when I was in India, and he was from Thailand, and he was a healer. Normally, I don't let random people do healing work and stuff on me, but there was a level of, I don't know. It was, I trusted this guy, and he started doing this work on me. And as he would pull a certain part of my body, I would think of like, you know, something that happened or something somebody said to me like years ago, and I could feel it like releasing from my body. And then I've had similar experiences with yoga where all of a sudden it's like you unlock something and everything just comes out of you. So yeah. Or these moments where you're like, oh, that's why I do that thing. And it's like, it kind of gives you the opportunity to see yourself in this way that you're normally not able to see because you're just caught up in like, I don't know. We often have our heads really far up our own asses. So in these moments, you realize that, yeah, your shit does stink.
Definitely. You know, that's why I say, you know, that it removes the veil. You know, and I believe that, you know, it's so far away, but it's so close at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's right there. We just can't see it until the right key is ate or tried.
Yeah, you know, and I think we have these like glimpses, we have these moments where we see beyond this veil. We have these like moments, and then we kind of fall back into the reality that's kind of prescribed to us by society and everything else. And yeah, I feel like through these different practices, and I mean, you can get it in the woods, you can get it through moving your body through different like exercises and things like that. And all of a sudden you have these moments where you're like, oh, okay, like what we perceive as reality is not like, there's something beyond that, because I've had a glimpse of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Energy is reality. That ultimately, to me, energy is reality. That's ultimately what I believe in. Is we talked about, I talked about the cell earlier, and everything spinning in there. That empty space that's in there, that with everything spinning around it, the magic, the source is in that space. That's the magic, and that's energy, and it is what connects everything. So, and that's ultimately what I believe, and having a good, strong energy. None of this is a struggle. Earlier this week was very trying, like I was talking about at work. It was very trying. And today it was way different, because he was so much friendlier today. It was odd. So, but I took it for what it was and just went with it, and called it a good energy day.
Yeah. And I do think that over the last week, it's been particularly difficult. I think there's been a lot of heavy energy just with the stuff that's going on and how much stuff we're being exposed to on social media right now. And it's kind of like what everybody's talking about. And I definitely started noticing that around the beginning of COVID, and then went down the rabbit hole and was like, okay, got to get out of the rabbit hole. And then I did, and kind of got used to everything that was becoming the quote unquote new normal. And then, but I did notice my addiction to my phone becoming way more intense, like almost like when you can't socialize and connect with people and go for like a coffee or a walk or a hike or whatever it may be, you tend to gravitate towards the next closest thing, which is your phone. But then, as I've noticed over the last, week in particular, how every time I go on my phone, I'm feeling worse because of what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what people are talking about. And that's definitely when you need to, like purge this kind of stuff, because it starts to get in there, and like you start to feel that heaviness. And then I find that energy so distracting that instead of doing the things that I know are going to make me feel good, I just feel like I don't have the, patience or calm to sit down and, do the things that make me feel good.
Jiu-Jitsu is picking back up, so I get to have that release. But I get it. We have a really strict phone policy at work, so I'm on it less. And for a 12-hour shift, we start at 4. And we have a 10-minute break at 7, then another 10-minute break at 10, and then a half an hour at 12, then another 10-minute at 2:30. So 10 minutes, I'm trying to get my daily calories, my protein intake. So I have to eat, and then we'll text Steph, to talk to her for a few minutes on my break. So I don't have much scrolling time while I'm at work, and I've really eliminated a lot of being on my phone while I'm at home. I try to put it in a room and put it in the bedroom and shut the door and go out and hang out. And, maybe we've been big on watching a series together on Netflix.
Which one?
The big one that started for us was Marco Polo.
Oh, okay.
It's only 2 seasons, but it's one of my favorites. We binge watched The Witcher.
Oh yeah, we watched that one too.
He's one of my favorite characters. He's so gruff, but he's a great guy down past the gruff. What did we just watch? That was a movie called The King.
Have you seen that one on, I think it's on I think it's HBO or Crave or something like that, but it's about the guy who is in prison and he's horse training, and he's doing, what was that one called? Yeah, he's doing like I like literally just watched it the other day. This guy's doing it's like part of the like therapy program for like early release or something.
Oh, okay.
And the guy is doing like they're training wild horses. That was really good, actually.
Oh, the one we were really big on too was The Last Kingdom.
Okay.
Which was really good. The whole Danes and English, the fights and battles in England for control through there. One of my favorite series. I actually liked it more than Vikings, which we were big on watching for a while, and then we just kind of cut it off. And we've been trying to negotiate what we're gonna dive into next.
Do you have HBO or anything like that?
We do for right now. We're getting ready to cut it off because we don't ever watch it.
Right.
It's like, what do we want to watch? So when we get a chance, like Marco Polo is not kid friendly.
No. You got a kid in the house?
Some stuff in there. We have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old in the house.
Oh, okay.
Going to be 12.
Right.
So
gotta be moderate with the content
we have
of
to be
what
cautious
you're watching.
of what we're watching. So
Westworld's pretty good. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's
I've seen it advertised.
Yeah, I mean I would say Westworld, it doesn't it's HBO. There's nudity for sure and there's violence, but it's not sleazy the way that and I love Game of Thrones, but there were certain things in Game of Thrones that were quite
never
sleazy.
seen a single episode of that.
Oh, really?
Or Breaking Bad. Never seen an episode of Breaking Bad.
I started watching Breaking Bad, and I stopped watching it because I think it was just, I tend to only watch a limited amount of drama, serious, violent kind of shows, because otherwise I find I'll go to bed at night and have nightmares.
And it'll bring your energy down too.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to. I'm super conscious of my energy at all time. I try to always pick something. We'll go from that, and if we don't have time, if the kids are home, we watch a lot of stuff about like Blue Planet or a nature show, because we both love nature shows. That helps a lot too, to bring our energy back up too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I know shock value is more entertaining, but I've also noticed that the kind of stuff that they're putting on TV now, and in just movies and TV shows in general, I don't know how many times we've been sitting here and we're like, what is going on? Like, the kinds of stuff they're putting in movies now and in TV, we're like, what? Like, this would have not been this way in, the 90s or even 10 years ago. Like, are we being desensitized? Because, oh man, just some of it. I've literally there was this one called Sharp Objects on HBO, and it was a really good storyline, but the content and the vibe was just so dark and creepy. Like, it was about this small town, and these young girls were going missing, and I'm just editing some of the graphic content to that.
Yeah.
Good storyline, good characters, but it was so dark and creepy that I was going to bed at night and I was having nightmares. And I'm like, okay, I'm not watching this anymore. I can't. See,
and that goes back to the darker, deeper stuff that's going on that you don't see, because I've said this for some years now. They call it a program for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes you wonder too, okay, I've seen a lot of stuff on TV where it's They're desensitizing pedophilia. They're desensitizing sexual violence. They're desensitizing violence, graphic violence in general. And like the brain and a subconscious mind does not know the difference between what you're seeing on TV and having the real, like your subconscious mind records everything. It doesn't go, oh, this is not real. It's like you're traumatizing yourself.
It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. And then you also, I think what's so creepy about it is when you're desensitized to violence, then actually when you see somebody in real life, you might freeze and not act on it, or like make the right choice to call somebody, or if you're a big tough dude, to save the woman who's being attacked on the street if you have the physical means to do that. You know, like you kind of, I question a lot why they're putting that kind of stuff in TV. Like, is there a deliberate desensitizing that's happening right now?
I believe that there is.
Yeah, I've had conversations with a few friends. This is where people are like, you're a conspiracy theorist, but hey, you know.
But it's way too coincidental, like you talked about earlier. It's way too coincidental and way too big in numbers for it not to be intentional in a way. So
yeah, well, I had a friend point out. About the latest Quentin Tarantino movie that came out, and we all know Quentin Tarantino is completely weird. He makes, unique movies, and from an artistic standpoint, he's brilliant, but he's messed up. Like the stuff coming out of that dude's head is messed up. And something that I had a friend point out, and I never noticed it, was these several points in the film that were insinuating pedophilia, and I didn't realize it. But, the point where Brad Pitt is, like the girls offering, I don't know have you seen that Hollywood, the latest one, or what? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. Well, there's this one point where the guy, I didn't really like it. But then after the fact, talked to a friend about this, and then I was like, whoa, no way, you're so right. There's this point where Brad Pitt, he goes to pick up this like underage teenager, and she's like offering him a blowjob basically for this ride. And he thinks about it, and I was like, interesting. There wasn't like a, no, or a like, why do you even need to put that in there? But he takes this moment and he kind of thinks about it, and then no, like, I shouldn't. And it's just like, and then there was another point, and I didn't realize this until after, where there's this young girl and she's on set and she's consoling the other character. I forget which main character it was. I think, was it Lynn? Who's the other guy in that one? Anyway, she's consoling him, and she gets down, and I thought it was strange because she gets down on her knees and she kind of kneels on the ground in front of him and puts her hand on his knee. She must have been like, I don't know, 10. And she's saying all these like very like, wisdom beyond her years kinds of things to him and consoling him, a grown man. And this is the part I missed, was the angle that they shot it from looked kind of like as if she was on her knees. Yeah. And I didn't realize it. And I was like, why are they putting that kind of stuff? And it's subtle enough that most of us wouldn't even catch that. And you're like, that's, what's going on here? That's this kind of stuff. Like,
it's creepy.
Yeah.
Way creepy.
Yeah, I know. Definitely. Well, I know we've been chatting for a while here, so I kind of want to wrap it up soon, but I had a couple questions for you before we do. Okay. And actually, one of the things that I had done here was I had quoted something that you had said. And you were saying that it's all in your mindset. You create your own reality. I look at where I'm at now in my life and I think, man, I created this shit because I put in the work to get to where I am now. And then you also said your thoughts lead to your decisions and your decisions lead to your actions every single time. So with those two things that you just said, I wanted to ask you, how, if you had a message that you could give to young men that might be where you were at that time in your life, like what's your message to those young men, and like giving them a little bit of hope that no, they're not stuck there, and that they can choose to, you know, create a good life for themselves?
Wow. I think it goes back to you have to want it for you. You can't want it for somebody else. You can't want it for your buddy. You know, it goes back to thoughts, decisions, actions. You know, do I want to create something on this path, or do I want to create something on my path? You know, just because I'm friends with them doesn't mean that I have to have their same path. We don't have to walk that together. You create it by making the correct decisions, which ultimately leads to your actions. If you want something, because it doesn't matter where you're at. Everybody has. We might not have the same immediate opportunities in front of us, but we ultimately can. You can create it by making the decisions. I don't know. It sounds like I'm talking in a circle there, but you have to ultimately have something that you want beyond any type of importance. It has to be here, you know. And I talk about my gut when I started really feeling more conscious energy. I talked about that, man. I felt like, you know, from like my breadbasket, from my solar plexus to the top of my head, it was like on fire, you know. And a friend of mine told me that it's funny you say in your solar plexus, because that's where all your decisions are made. If it's good from there up, you're making decisions and actions that are in accordance with your higher self. If it's down below, you are making decisions and actions that correspond with your lower self. So
listening to your intuition more, and being more heart driven, and
you know, talk about intuition. I think that's you know, whether it's, if you believe it's your angel or your spirit guide or the universe guiding you, you know, that gut, you know, my gut has never, ever been wrong. And it's stronger than ever. And I listen to it without fail.
Your intuition's like a muscle, and any of the times that, you know, we don't listen to it, it's like, you know, when things get really bad, there was a moment before where you had this, maybe I shouldn't do this.
Definitely. And that's part of that, you know, okay, that you've just thought about it. And now you're making a decision. Now you just have to put it into action. And that's creating your circumstance.
It's kind of like flexing a muscle, your intuition. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And then you learn to trust yourself.
Yeah. And then that's, you know, go back to energy. The more I use that, the more I flex that energetic vibe, the better it gets. The more it guides me. You know, I'm one of the goofiest guys. I don't know how many times a day, in just a case of a few hours, Steph will roll her eyes at me because I've done something guy goofy. But at the same time, just like laughing there, it gets her to smile, and ultimately that's what it's all about, because that makes me feel better. I just put a genuine smile on her face, whether she's rolling her eyes or, you know, she has that crooked smile. I know that I've done something right. So and I try to do that. with every aspect. It's just making a decision. How do I want to ultimately feel about what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I could put that if you want to put that. How am I going to feel about what I'm getting ready to do?
Have you ever thought about youth leading or public speaking for young men?
I've actually, when I was in Indiana, I went to a Job Corps center, which
Mm-hmm.
was really interesting because it was a completely different demographic from myself. They were decades younger and on the bottom end of the poverty scale. And, my problem with going in, it was the first time I spoke to a group, and my problem going in was how am I going to relate to them? And I start off, I don't know how I can relate to you. I don't know how I'm going to relate to you. I don't know how this is going to help you. But what I can do is I can tell you what I went through and how I got there and how I got myself out. And if there's something that you can grab a hold of, then bonus. And I went to a county jail in Indiana. The the jail commander happened to be an active police officer when I was in my youth, that lived down the block from me, and we got it coordinated. And I went up and I spoke to a group in the morning and then a group in the afternoon after lunch. And I hope that a couple of those guys that the impact still sits with them, because I had quite a few of them thank me for coming in, because a lot of the times they don't get people that have been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, I feel it because I wore the jumpsuit, guys. I've been in your position. I've been there.
Yeah. That if I can do it, you can do it. That's such an important message.
Yeah.
You should write a book.
I have several chapters started, and I just haven't finished them. I have so much writing started on different chapters.
I feel you. I got the same thing. Yeah.
So, I haven't started. It's just not finished yet.
I know.
And I have to make a decision to sit down and write. Because when I could sit down and do it, it comes out and I do really well. But
yeah, people keep saying about like book coaching, and I'm in the process right now of looking into getting some book coaching because of the fact that you get someone who can kind of review your stuff, and also just because I think with like your first book, it's the whole process of I have so many things to say, but how do I want to say it? Is this more than one book? Is this all in one book? Is this a chapter? Is this a subsection? How do I put it all together? And then you just kind of go, I'm just going to avoid this for a while.
It doesn't make sense when I write it because it sounds so good in my head. And then when I write it down, I'm like, oh, I'm a caveman. I'm writing like I'm thinking, and you can't always write like you think. It's a different process. But I'm still learning from it, so it's great.
Well, you definitely should, because like you have a very powerful message and an inspiring story. And this, if I can do it, you can do it. People need to hear that, because I think a lot of people kind of get down in the dumps and they think that that's your reality. And I mean, you have to work hard, and it's something you have to do for the rest of your life. It's not just I'm going to do this for a bit and then life is perfect and you're in the clear. It's like a lifelong process, but it's the fact that we have the choice. And I think that a lot of people don't think that they have the choice. And if you don't think you have a choice, you're always a victim.
Yep.
You're never responsible. And then you stay stuck and you keep repeating the same cycles and stuff. Yeah. So you got a unique story.
Thanks. I got involved also with some group. It was about life coaching and developing your own program. And I actually had my own program. It's a 4-block system called Guerrilla Performance and Recovery, and it applies to all facets of life. And you talked about public speaking, and that's something that I would want to get more involved in. It's probably an excuse. I'm working so much right now, and right now I'm the only one in the house working, and we're doing a ton of hours Monday through Friday, and then every other Saturday. So it's hard to get things moving, especially with the whole COVID thing going on now. Especially getting into, nobody wants to be in public all gathered up together.
Unless you're protesting something.
I almost said that.
I'll say it.
I almost said that.
You're immune to COVID. You're immune to COVID if you're protesting or rioting. FYI.
I'm immune because I take my vitamins and I take care of myself.
Yes, which is the best thing you can do.
And I probably ate a bunch of dirt as a kid. So, I was out in the woods eating stuff out of the creek, crawdads and stuff like that. So
got to raise your immunity. That's the best thing you can possibly do. And
I don't even wipe down the grocery cart with the sanitizer thing when I go in now. I just have it.
See, I was, and then all of a sudden recently I'm like, is this real? I don't know anymore. I'm not going to stress about it.
I completely charge through the store. Is it because when I walk with a purpose? I know what I need, especially when I'm by myself. I know what I need. I have 1, 2, 3 stops. And it's funny because people will come around a corner and then they see me walking and I'm not breaking stride. I'll walk around you. I'll step around. I'll be cordial. But then all of a sudden they're backpedaling 3 steps because they don't want to be within 6 feet.
I know.
So it's like, great. I got green lights like in Bruce Almighty, man. I'm going straight to checkout and I'm out of here.
See, that's the one thing that I noticed where I started questioning. I was like, I'm like, oh, like you see it when you go into the grocery store where people are like, like you're viewing everyone as a threat. Like it's totally put people into this weird survival mentality. And what a like brilliant psychological warfare if that was the intention, to like make people afraid of one another.
And then they did the hotline in New York to tell on people, and that completely backfired. I don't know
the tattletale line. What? Yeah, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, you should. They had a number, and apparently they got a lot of a lot of pictures that were unnecessary, but. Yeah,
like what?
There were some people that retaliated in a fantastic way. A lot of uncensored shots. I'll just say that.
Okay, so I was going to say, are we talking dick pics?
Yes, I guess. Yeah, they got a lot of dick pics, and I guess a lot of people flipping them the bird too. So
snitches get dick pics.
I think it's hilarious that it completely backfired on us.
That is hilarious. Gotta love a good sense of humor. So, Joel, where can people find you?
Facebook, Joel Blanton. On Instagram, baby_silverback.
Okay.
I'm not active on Twitter a whole lot, but
it's a dark place.
Oh man. At capital B, capital J, Blanton, at Blanton Joel.
I'm gonna have to follow you on there.
I'm not on there a whole lot. I'm super busy. I try to put out regular content on Instagram, for my sponsors and for people, just in general.
Instagram's a friendly neighborhood. Twitter is so dark. It
seems like that. I get back to. I try to get back to messages. I'm engaged with, people message me, just try to talk to people, and give back. 'Cause I know ultimately, energetically it comes back. So.
Well, it's a good place to be and a good place to end. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Me. Yeah, it was great getting to actually have a face-to-face.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll chat again soon.
All right.
Bye, Joel.
Bye.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Shanti Ma Podcast. The Shanti Ma Podcast is a proud supporter of Love Braj. Love Braj is a nonprofit organization located in one of my most favorite places on earth, Vrindavan, India. They have many different programs all wrapped into one. Aside from distributing food, they provide medical supplies, chest clinics, and dental services to the needy, as well as clean up garbage, plant trees, feed street cows, and more. If you'd like to help, you can donate on their website at radharaman.org/donate. That's radharaman.org/donate. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Shanti Ma podcast. I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Until next time. Om Bhurbhuva Svaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhahimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuva Svaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhahimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The Shanti Ma podcast.